The 2022 NBA Finals kick off Thursday night. I'm being joined right now by Locked On Warriors host Cyrus Saatsaz. Cyrus, thanks so much for joining me tonight. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Celtics versus Warriors should be a fun one. They split the season series 1-1. They've always played each other tough over the last 5 years. The Warriors, they're in the finals for the 6th time in the last 8 seasons. The Celtics, first time since 2010, but they've played in a lot of big playoff games recently, and they finally gotten over the hump. So what are your first thoughts when you look at this matchup on paper? What are some of the things that jump out to you?
First off, I would recommend for anyone has a vested interest in this or is just a fan of basketball, throw all the regular season numbers out. It means next to nothing. Like I've heard people throw out, for example, the Celtics have a winning record. They're the only team in the NBA who has a winning record versus the Warriors since the dynasty run started. But that also includes 2020, 2021, when they had no Klay Thompson both those years, no Steph for one of those years. And they just had really thin rosters, and they went 0-4 in those 2 years. So you take those out, and the Warriors still do have a winning record. But besides the point, it's just this Warriors team has just been through so many wars that around year 3 or year 4, they started to kind of reprioritize where to emphasize their most energy and where to really put the most effort. And that's not really in the regular season anymore. This season was important in the sense that they were developing Jordan Poole. The 2 rookies were developing. So there was value there. But, when the Warriors had that incredible start, they started the season 18-2. They were 27-6 on Christmas Day after they beat the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix. Shortly after that, Draymond Green got hurt, and then kind of the whole attitude changed. And they were like, all right, look, we're going to the playoffs. At this point now, it's all about health. It's all about getting prepared for that. And so you saw, development. You saw just, the newer players getting more accustomed to the system, which has incredible ball movement, has incredible player movement off the ball. And then obviously their defense. I mean, their defense was number 1 in the NBA before Draymond Green's injury. I mean, I hear a lot of narratives being put out there that this is like the Warriors offense versus Celtics defense. But what I've been telling people repeatedly in terms of why I'm predicting the Warriors to win this series is that I don't think the Celtics offense can score enough points against that Warriors defense, which again was number 1 in the NBA, both in defensive rating and points allowed before Draymond Green was injured in January. So this is a battle of 2 phenomenal defenses, but the Celtics have not played any team in the playoffs so far comparable to this Warriors team. And I do think ultimately it's just, I don't think they can put up enough points to match them.
For sure, I got you. Yeah, you mentioned the Warriors. They were number 1 or number 2 in defense, and then the Celtics were right behind them. This is the first matchup in the finals with the top 2 defenses in the league with defensive efficiency since 1996. Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, it's more so of a defensive battle than an offensive battle. But, man, those offensive stars are some fierce, and especially on the Boston side of things, you're talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I anticipate that Jason Tatum is going to get the matchup of Andrew Wiggins is going to get that assignment. How do you see that looking? Because Wiggins did pretty good against Luka. He's grown as a defender tremendously during his time as a Warrior.
Yeah, and offensively, I mean, Wiggins incredibly was the leading 3-point shooter for the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals before Game 5. Then he reverted back to the mean a little bit and went 0 for 7 in Game 5. But his defense has really been exemplary. Like you mentioned, Luka Doncic, who was probably the best offensive player in these playoffs when you really go top to bottom. No disrespect to Jason Tatum. He is a phenomenal player, and I guarantee you Dub Nation is concerned about him and Jaylen Brown and those other weapons there. But, I had the former head coach and general manager of the Golden State Warriors, Gary St. Jean, on my program on Locked On Warriors a couple days ago, and he brought up something interesting because while it seems obvious that Wiggins is going to be the primary defender on Tatum, there is also a possibility you might see Klay Thompson playing a lot of defense on Jason Tatum as well, just because Klay, he's mostly back to his old form offensively. He's always been a streaky shooter, but overall his numbers, he's still shooting 40% from 3 or just maybe like a percentage point off that. He's averaging 19.8 points per game. But his defense has been kind of slow to come back with his recovery. He's having a hard time staying in front of smaller, quicker guards. But with a player like Tatum, like explosiveness and attacking the rim he's good at it. Don't get me wrong, but that's not necessarily his forte. He doesn't have that same explosiveness that like a John Morant has. that they had to deal with in the second round, for example. So you might actually see Clay taking on that assignment a lot. But Wiggins has shown, I mean, the way he played against Luka was, admirable. I don't know how else to describe that. It was, even though the numbers were there, he stopped them when it counted. And then here's the other thing about the Warriors defense that gives someone like me who does love this Warriors team while I try to cover it objectively, that gives me some hope and confidence is that the Draymond Green, he thrives the most defensively when he takes on like a free safety mentality, and he didn't have that luxury in the first round against Nikola Jokic. Like Draymond had to just focus on that big lumbering two-time MVP, and he was a tough task. The Grizzlies were pretty hard as well because the Grizzlies have pretty much 4 players who are 6'11" or 7 feet. And so Draymond really had to be like an inside presence and taking the brunt of the size. But with the Mavericks, you saw him suddenly being able to kind of double up, roam around, lead the defense and kind of guide them in terms of switches. And, they play their defense on a string. I'm guessing you've heard that before, but it's really true. They're as good as the Celtics are switching wise, and they are phenomenal. Like they're the only team in the NBA who not only switches defensively on ball, but also off ball, which is why a lot of people are kind of giving them credit and giving them a chance against this Warriors team. But at the same time, the Warriors do the same thing. I guess I should say 2 teams do it. The Warriors also do it. And when Draymond is there playing that free safety role, it's just an extra additive security that the Warriors have. And I think that with all these reasons, I think that's why the Warriors will pull this off. But it could be a phenomenal close series.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you mentioned Draymond, and I watched some of Steve Kerr's press conference today. He mentioned he compared Draymond and Marcus Smart together. I think that's a great comparison because both of them are defensive player of the years, and like you mentioned, they both can switch guard 1 through 5, in my opinion. How do you see compare Marcus Smart's role on the Celtics to Draymond's role on the Warriors?
Similar in a lot of ways. First of all, Steve Kerr is he's very media savvy. Like he's a master of letting the public hear what should be heard without giving any bulletin board material. I mean, all this love and respect, all it does is prevent the Celtics from getting that extra motivation to attack the Warriors, right? And one key way to do that is complimenting. You're seeing both sides do it. It's kind of funny right now. But there is truth to it. Marcus Smart has arguably been the best defender on Stephen Curry since they've both been in the league. But at the same time, it's hard to get a good measure on it because they never played in the playoffs. They play twice a year at the most. And during the regular season, there just isn't the time to game plan for an opposing player. So for a guy like Marcus Smart, who, again, is incredibly defensively, the only difference really between him and Draymond is size and experience, I guess. And even the experience isn't that much of a difference outside of the 3 rings. So they're very similar. Yeah. And I'm personally am very curious to see what the Warriors game plan is to counter that. You're probably going to be seeing a lot of switches. And keep in mind too that they're not forgetting what happened the last time they played when Smart, not intentionally, I mean, I'm not making that accusation, but it certainly was recklessly diving for that ball and hurting Stephen Curry. I mean, Steph was out for a month because of that foot injury. And don't forget on the same play too. And this is where some people, if they say dirty, have a hard time arguing against it. There are variances, right? But Marcus Smart in that same play, he dives for a loose ball. Look, that was hustle, fine. It was a little reckless, but whatever. But on the same play, he gets up, karate kicks Klay Thompson to the chest. That is dirty. Like, there's no excuse for that. And then he fell and whined to the refs like he should have gotten the foul. That put a sour taste in Dub Nation's mouth, man. So I'm curious to see how the Warriors will react to that because they never forget.
Never forget, man. I can remember back in 2019 when Chris Paul kicked Steph off the court and everything pregame in Game 6, and then Steph came back, went off in the 4th quarter. Yeah, these boys don't forget. It's crazy. They take things personal. Like
they don't
Michael
say
Jordan.
it. They don't say it, but they I've heard enough, and I'm talking to some of these guys off the record where they don't forget. And they're very much like, if you've seen The Last Dance, where one of the revelations of that amazing Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary was that Jordan takes anything he can for motivation, right? So if he just sees one negative word come out of an opponent, he just uses that as fuel. And this Warriors team is no different. They use anything they can to add to that killer instinct. There's a reason why they've had so much postseason success. I mean, keep in mind, this team, when healthy, has never lost in the postseason in the Dynasty era since they won that title. You know, people bring up 2016, but Steph and Iguodala were both injured. They played through it. And then Bogut was out for game 6 and 7. Plus, you got the stimulus package they get to LeBron. No offense to LeBron fans, but look, Draymond Green was suspended in game 5. That's fact. And you know, and then 2019, you had a bunch of stars hurt.
Yeah.
So when this team's healthy, they don't lose. And I'm curious to see what the Celtics do and what the game plan is for the Warriors.
For sure. We're winding down here, Cyrus, but I wanted to make sure I asked you about Klay Thompson. You mentioned him. He's averaging 20 points per game in the postseason. Like you say, slowly but surely getting back to the Klay Thompson that we're used to seeing. We're thinking you say he could play against Jason Tatum. He's probably going to get some assignments on Jaylen Brown as well. Specifically looking at the Jaylen Brown matchup, how do you see that shaping up?
Jaylen Brown is athletically, he's a beast. I mean, he can attack the rim. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's not bad either. I think he shot 35% from beyond the arc. I mean, Jaylen Brown is, to me, an excellent number 2 to complement Jason Tatum. And he's got local ties, which is kind of weird. The local media is talking to him about his days playing at Cal. He's not someone that I'm happy about. He's on the other side because he is a great player. He's a former All-Star, and I'm curious to see that. And I was talking to the Locked On Celtics host John Corrales about this yesterday. Like, those 2 missed free throws in the Heat series kind of gave me pause a little bit, just because I mean that almost cost them that whole series ultimately. I mean, it was kind of wild that he did that. Jaylen Brown is Jaylen Brown. He's a great player. He's big. I don't know who's going to have the defensive assignment on him. Again, the Celtics love to switch as much as the Warriors do offensively. So they like to look for primary matchups that favor them. And I don't think they want matchups that involve Klay or Wiggins playing defense. So I don't know if they're going to try to go after Kevon Looney and set that kind of matchup up. Obviously, they're going to hunt Stephen Curry and Jordan Poole when they're out there. But yeah, Jaylen Brown's a threat. There's no way around it.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevon Looney, and one of the things that really struck, I just noticed in the last series was he guarded Luka, and he did pretty good. I mean, so yes, that might not be something that the Celtics want to go after, because Looney seemed like he was able to switch, and if he can guard Luka, I mean, I'm just saying he probably could guard Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum too if need be.
At least hold his own, yeah. But what Kevon Looney's been fascinating in this postseason, just because he played himself out of the rotation in the first round. He could not guard Nikola Jokic for the life of him. The 2-time MVP was just owning him, and he got to the point where he found himself out of the rotation. Early in the Grizzlies series, they were actually starting Jonathan Kuminga over him before they kind of started to realize, okay, Looney can handle bigs who are not Jokic. And then he's responded. I mean, he had 22 rebounds in that closeout game against the Grizzlies, 11 of those offensive. He had 18 rebounds in the closeout game against the Mavericks. And when he was drafted as a small forward, which is really weird. Not a lot of people remember that, but he's had these 2 hip surgeries that's changed who he is as a player, and it's slowed him down. He doesn't have the agility that he once did, but it's fascinating to see how much he's adapted his game and has really emerged as this big man that the Warriors needed, because without him, they're so thin in the front court. Great call on bringing him up, because he's had with the exception of that first round, but I don't know anyone could blame him. It's Jokic. He's one of the hardest guys to defend. Yeah. He's had an amazing postseason, and you're right. He's not someone that you just really pick on in terms of attacking the Warriors.
Yeah, for sure. And then now let's go ahead and talk about some of the X factors, and Kevon Looney could very well be one of those X factors. But who else is an X factor, not only on the Warriors side of things, but maybe also on the Celtics side of things as well?
Well, the Celtics, I think if there's going to be an X factor, it's going to be someone from the bench that we haven't seen much yet. It's the Celtics do have a short roster when it comes, like, they're going to be realistically playing an 8-man roster, maybe 9 occasionally. But what the Warriors do to most teams is they force the opposition to get creative when things aren't working. So you might see an X factor like a Stauskas, for example, someone who's a former lottery pick who can shoot from deep. We haven't seen him much, if at all, recently, but someone like him could emerge. I mean, for the Warriors, there's a wide range to choose from, just because Andre Iguodala, for example, hasn't played since, I think, game 3 of the first round. Yeah. And all signs are he's hopefully going to play. He's listed as questionable. Gary Payne II is listed as questionable, which is incredible. I'd say those two could be an X factor because I've been saying firmly for about 4 or 5 days now, if GP2 plays, if Iggy plays, he hates Iggy, I'm sorry, if Iguodala plays, and if Otto Porter Jr. plays, I think the Warriors can finish this in 5. I really do. It sounds arrogant, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. I have tremendous respect for the Celtics, but the Warriors, if those players are available, go 12 deep in terms of just players who can play meaningful minutes. I'm including the 2 rookies, Moses Moody, who's really stepped up, especially in the last round, and then Kuminga, who's going to be, I think, a superstar someday in this league. So they're deep, but if you have to ask me for an X factor, I'd throw one of those 2 guys out because Iguodala, even though he's 38, he had this monster dunk in the Nuggets series that reminded people he's still got that athleticism, and he's just such a smart player, and especially an amazing defensive player that if you have him out there, you can't attack him, and it limits your offense tremendously. So I'm gonna go with one of those 2 guys, and I really hope they play.
For sure. Yeah, me too. Definitely is going to help the Warriors out. All right, Cyrus, wrapping up here. My last question for you. You mentioned all the things that the Warriors will need to do if they want to win this series, and you're picking Dubs in 5. But if the Warriors lose this series, what do you think will have to happen for them to lose this series?
If I think so, you're asking like what do the Celtics have to do to win? Basically, is like Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart have to hit their threes. Like they can't have a lot of off nights, and they're gonna have hands in their faces a lot. They're gonna be facing really unique defenses. The Warriors have just been. I mean, Mike Brown, his swan song with his team before he goes to the Sacramento Kings, he's been throwing so many switches in terms of the schematics. Like you're seeing different variances of the zone from like a 2-3 to a 1-2-1 to a box and 1 to a 3-2. I mean, they're throwing everything out there, and they're a great team. They're great in terms of playing man defense. So the Celtics they have to make their shots. It's just plain and simple. Like if they shoot like how the Mavericks shot for most of that series, this is not going to be close because the Celtics, I mean, they struggled to put up points against most of those Eastern Conference teams. And the Warriors defense, and never mind the offense, the defense is going to be more stout. So you not only have to like put up as many points as you have been, which hasn't been that much. I haven't looked at the numbers recently. I don't know what they were averaging offensively, but you're going to have to put up more because whatever you gave up, I think they gave up 101 points per game in the postseason. Add 10 to that for the Warriors. They're just that much better. So the Warriors realistically could be averaging anywhere from 110 to 115 points per game. And if you're the Celtics, you have to match that. So they're going to have to make their shots. That's the bottom line. And if they're having off nights or if they're struggling in any regard making baskets, that's why I think this could be a short series. Now, look, I'm not confident in that Warriors in 5. Like I'm just saying that because look, we have to pick, make a pick. It could easily go 7. I mean, if the Celtics win, it wouldn't shock me. It would. I mean, I would be disappointed and a little surprised, but they're a damn good team. There's no way to spin it. It's just I just have faith and confidence in a dynasty coming through again, and that's why I'm picking the Warriors.